Hello, everyone. Oh, I did not get that transition very well. I have a spot on my hand. I have this very odd thing. It's actually not odd, it's very common. I have a hand and foot eczema that causes little water spots on your hand, and I can always feel when one is developing. Oh, you know what I'm also missing? Although we do have plenty of light, the studio light, and that's much better. I can always feel when one is coming up, and for me, they're usually caused by stress, although sometimes it can just be caused by interacting with water too much, um, which is always fun. And I was noticing it's not there yet, but it's a coming. So, happy Monday, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal News Hour. Each week, I deliver you kind of the important headlines and make it so that you sound smarter than all your friends the next time you're in the group chat, at the party, at the spot, whatever have you. And um, obviously, this week, oh, we've had some fun ones. Where do you want to start? Israel is decapitating Iran, or at least trying to. A dude in Minnesota, who is trying to say is a Democrat, even though he isn't, shot two Democratic lawmakers, killing one and her spouse and wounding another and his spouse, um, and then triggered a 2-day manhunt. And that's before we get into the aftermath of the LA riots, the No Kings protest on Saturday, and Trump's military parade slash birthday bash that was the 250th anniversary of the Army, etc., that also was happening on Saturday. It's been busy since the last time I saw you. Although most of what I've just told you has happened in the last 72 hours. Although the Iran and Israel started on Friday. It's been a very interesting situation. There's been kind of a lot going on in the news. I do want to make sure, if you're not aware, I do have my membership, Cameron Journal Plus. If you love this journalism and support what I do, make sure to go to CameronJournal.com/subscribe and sign up for that. And thank you to all my Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. If you want the best of my work delivered to your inbox every Saturday, sometimes on Sundays, and usually on Wednesdays, then make sure to sign up for the newsletter, CameronJournal.com/newsletter. I do a big wrap-up on Saturday that gets you, it's everything. The newsletter, the news hour. It's basically, Saturday is, if you missed everything, here's everything. Sort of thing. And it's really great because I do a little bit of personal updates, 2 or 3 news stories, you get my videos, everything's just right there for you. So it's the best thing to sign up for. And then I will usually do maybe a single article or two during the week, and Sunday sometimes I'll have a little bit of story time or a personal essay. So it's fun here. So make sure to check those things out. It's really great. And then also make sure to follow me on social media. I do stay active on all your favorite platforms, so make sure to check those things out, especially if you're watching this right now on Facebook or something. Make sure that you're following the page, because I've always got new things coming out. I also want to make a special note, and I'm going to start talking about this more. My next book, America's Lost Generation, is actually ready for publication. I know I've talked about this before. We had some problems and delay. Worked through it. And now it's actually done being typeset. And so we're ready to really get in there. So I'm taking pre-orders right now. CameronJoel.com/Cameron's Books. If you go up to the top, Cameron's Books, you can pre-order there. You can also pre-order at Soup, which is really great. SoupLLC.com, you can pre-order there as well. You're going to see it, if you subscribe to the newsletter, you're going to see it all the time on a regular basis, because I'm going to be promoting a lot. I also have a lot of really great new content about millennials, telling millennial stories through the lens of what happened to Japan in 1991. And I'm going to be doing some podcasts and some exclusive videos for video platforms as well. So that's very, very exciting. And we're really, like I said, really excited about that. Looking forward to having that book out in the world. I started writing that book around, I want to say 2020 or so. I think I started writing it during the pandemic, maybe early 2021, but I started writing it in 2020. It was actually one of about two different books that I started writing it then. And it's taken a long time to come out. I had to update a lot of numbers and different things along the way. But it's good. So it's a lot of fun, and it includes real data about the post-Great Financial Crisis world, real data about millennials. It also includes real live interviews from r/lost generation on Reddit. I was very active in that community, have been active in that community. I put out a clarion call and said, tell me your stories. Just whatever's just tell me your stories. And we got a little bit of everything. Really, we did. We got a little bit of everything. We got some people who were doing fine. We got some people who were doing really bad. We got some people who were maybe a little bit over dramatic. Like the guy who said he didn't want to commit suicide because he had to write, and I'm kind of like, wow, slow your roll there, Phantom of the Opera. It's a very interesting, dynamic. I'd love to check in on some of these people now. Most of the accounts that sent me stories and whatnot are deleted, so I can't really check in with them 5 years on. But it would be interesting to kind of see where everyone's at, especially what's happened post-pandemic, which I get into a little bit, but not a ton. There's other better stuff for that. If you want to read me about that, go to the What the Hell is Going On collection and read post-COVID economics. That's where I really get into post-COVID econ. But yeah, so that's coming out soon, so make sure to check that out. Like I said, it's going to be pretty much in everything I send out from now on for a while. So it's that's coming as well. So that's a really fun, really great announcement. We're very excited about that, of course. So, with all that being said, we'll turn to the headlines, and we're going to start with Israel and Iran, of course. Here we go. Here we are. So, I have headphones on because I have a couple of videos we're going to watch today, including a very disturbing one from Peter Thiel. We'll get there. This right now, although I don't know that it's coming up, is Israel bombed the headquarters of Iran's state broadcaster, and this is the fire. That's the most latest attack. On Friday, their opening salvo was to take out most of the high command of Iran's military. Most of them are gone. It has caused chaos on the ground, and people are already trying to leave. Gas stations are running out of gas. We have an update from the New York Times. We'll read here. Israel expanded its attacks on Iran on Monday, striking the headquarters of a state television broadcaster, while anchors were live on air as the fiercest and deadliest confrontation in the history of the Israeli-Iranian conflict continued into a fourth day. Israel appears to be acting with increasing confidence, telling residents to evacuate parts of Tehran, hinting in advance that it was about to attack the state television complex, and claiming, quote, full aerial superiority, unquote, that enables it to strike at an expanding range of targets. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in comments on Monday, even declined to rule out targeting Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In Tehran, residents weighed whether to take shelter or flee the city as gas stations ran short of fuel, and internet and phone services were disrupted. Quote, where can 500,000 people go in a moment's notice? Asked Daniel Amin, a resident of the Zafar neighborhood. The highways are completely blocked. We are trapped. With civilian casualties climbing on both sides, the war now seems like it'll last for weeks, not days. Early on Monday, Israel said it had attacked the headquarters of Iran's elite Quds force in Tehran, and later in the day, its military announced it was striking missile infrastructure in western Iran. The extent of any casualties or damage could not immediately be verified independently. Iran continues to return fire by launching barrages of ballistic missiles at Israel. Iranian missiles struck several Israeli cities early on Monday, killing at least 8 people, according to Israeli officials. Since Israel began attacking Iran on Friday, Israeli strikes have killed at least 224 people in Iran, according to the Iranian Health Ministry, and injured more than 1,400 people. In Israel, the government said at least 24 people had died, with roughly 600 injured. Here's what else to know. And that's not important. Here we go. Some Iranians are seeing themselves for a longer conflict and weighing how to find relative safety. Long lines of cars have packed highways heading out of the city, though many residents have no place to go. Iran is often portrayed as a dangerous rogue state whose growing nuclear program and shadowy military capabilities threaten Israel, the United States, and beyond. But attacks on Iran since the war erupted between Israel and Hamas in October 2023 have weakened the Iranian leadership and its proxy militias, and the current war with Israel shows just how compromised and weak Iranian forces really are. So obviously, for those of us who really pay attention to international news, this has been the big story. It says here the very very latest update. One was killed. The latest update from President Trump, who's at the G7 summit in Canada, said, "quote What a shame and waste of human life." Trump wrote, "Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Iran." So for those of us that pay attention to international news, this is a quite shocking development, and something that is a very significant moment in the whole conversation that we've been having about this. Israel is definitely, I wouldn't say overextending themselves, but they've taken on a lot. Between the Hamas situation in Gaza, now attacking Iran, if they are successful in doing what it seems like they're doing, there'll be a massive shift in regional power away from Iran. Not really towards Israel, but more towards Saudi Arabia. That's another story we're not going to get into right now. But yes, it is definitely a significant moment. This is, I mean, honestly, it's what's kind of frightening is I always kind of joked there were a handful of conflicts that I always thought would start bigger conflicts, and we're seeing two of them in the last several years. The first one was Russia invading Ukraine. That was always going to happen someday. It was just a matter of when. And this is the other one. Is Israel preventing Iran from getting a nuclear bomb by bombing Iran? The only one that we haven't seen so far is China trying to seize Taiwan. And I don't want to think about that one. But this is this is the state of the state of things, and it is quite frightening on the ground. It's quite chaotic on the ground. And if Israel is successful in kind of, completely basically causing regime change into Iran and empowering people to seize against the theocratic government, it'll be probably the most significant regional power change since the last time Iran changed governments in 1979. So that's kind of where we are with that right now. Like I said, there's been different updates sort of streaming in. During the remarks to reporters an hour earlier, Trump said that he believed that Iran basically is at the negotiating table and wanted to make a deal. Asked if he wanted to see regime change in Iran, Trump replied, "I want to see no nuclear weapon in Iran, and we're well on our way to making sure that happens." So there's multiple. I can definitely see why President Trump didn't want to call for regime change in Iran. That would be provocative. And I think even he is smart enough not to do that. But there's definitely, I mean, based upon the course of action that Israel is taking, I don't know that they are unopposed to that idea themselves and or trying to make that happen. Given the types of targets they're striking, the type of people they're striking. And also telling people to evacuate. They obviously have many, many more attacks planned. Iran has not replied. Iran did fire several missiles at Tel Aviv over the weekend. um, and and there was, so this is some of the damage from the Iranian response to the attacks. What was, I think, most interesting about it is that the Iron Dome was relatively ineffective at stopping all the Iranian missiles from coming in. Um, and so we have, back and forth kind of pictures of Iran and Israel, and but it was interesting that the Iron Dome was not as effective as one thought it might be. This is Tel Aviv, um, and this is also Israel. That's a bombing in Tehran. That's a very nasty attack in Israel. So it is interesting that that the back and forth that has happened, and that the Iron Dome didn't work. But it's, of course, war is dramatic and always produces great photos. So, um, leaving that to one side, let's turn, speaking of violence, to the other big story, and that is Minnesota Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband being killed tragically by a man we now know to be what was his name? Vance something. There it is. No, that just says his Vance Belter. Forgot his last name. I remembered Vance, couldn't remember Belter. It's he had a list of Democratic operatives. He went to their homes and he killed Melissa Hortman. He shot State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, but they survived her in the hospital. The shootings are politically motivated, and of course, the first question everyone asks is he a Democrat or a Republican, so we know who to blame. And of course, this right here shows us everything that we, need to know. The shooter killed 2 Democrats, had a giant list of Democrats he wanted to kill, including abortion providers, was described by his neighbor as a huge Trump supporter, was a registered Republican, and you're still trying to tell me he's a Democrat. Grow up. Indeed. And according to his best friend, the Minnesota assassin who shot Democratic lawmakers, quote, voted for Donald Trump and was a strong Trump supporter, according to his best friend.
He was a strong supporter. We even asked about Mr. Bolter's political affiliations, and David Carlson, once again his roommate and best friend, known him since 4th grade, did say Bolter voted for Trump and that he was a strong supporter.
So it's the back and forth over the weekend on Twitter. People were calling for Governor Walz to resign. That it was all Democrats' fault, even though that was not the case. And there's this video. He was a super big evangelical guy. There's a video of him literally right here, like, literally preaching,
especially in America. Il y a des gens, particulièrement aux États-Unis. They don't know what sex they are. They don't know how their sexual orientation. They're confused. Ils ne savent pas ce qu'ils sont exactement. Ils ont une confusion. The enemy has gotten so far into their mind and their soul. Et l'ennemi est entré dans le fond de leur pensée et de leur âme. But this word, mais ces paroles, no sin. Et il n'y a aucun péché.
I mean, it's kind of obvious, where he was, sort of thing. This tweet right here really represents, I think, what people were trying to do is because one of the issues is this guy Vance Belter. I should say this first. He's on some sort of workers' commission appointed by Governor Walz, and which I think was rather unpaid. I think it was a volunteer sort of thing. And this guy's kind of like, well, the governor appointed him to a commission. He can't be a Republican. And that's not true at all. And so, I mean, literally we have video from his roommate saying, that he was a Trump supporter, all this type of thing. It's, yeah. And they did capture him, and he has been charged. We have the data about that. We're gonna come back to Mike Lee in a moment. Um, he has been charged with second-degree murder. It says one man's unthinkable actions have altered the state of Minnesota. Governor Tim Walz said at a news conference on Sunday night. The suspect was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder, according to a criminal complaint obtained by the New York Times. Um, and so, Mr. Bolter and his wife run a private security company that promotes the use of SUVs similar to those used by police departments, according to its website. The couple also appears to have run a religious nonprofit. According to the suspect's friend, he opposed abortion and supported President Trump, and he had previously served on the state workforce development board with Mr. Hoffman. There we go. Now, that's the facts of the case. Now let's talk about narrative. Because you know me, news is a narrative, that's why we call it a story. This is how he showed up at the state reps' houses. In this mask, with this gear. He had a private security company sort of thing. And so he had all this gear available and he kind of wore this mask. And this is what the spin has been. This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way. One, we have very few actual Marxists in this country. Second of all, Mike Lee is obviously hopping on this for attention. And two, this guy was not a Democrat. He was a Republican, and even if he wasn't a registered Republican, he at least held values that align far more with the Republican Party than the Democrat Party, based upon some of the videos that we've already seen. That's fine. And no criticism about that, all this sort of thing. He could have continued on being that way. He didn't have to shoot anybody, but it's quite obvious he became aware of Hoffman through his work on the state workforce board. And I think, it's probably a bipartisan move for Governor Walz to appoint the best people, not necessarily those just who were aligned with him ideologically. That happens in state government all the time. All the time. Because state governments actually have to get stuff done. And sometimes getting a job done at the state level doesn't perfectly align with red and blue politics. So there's more crossover at the state level than at the national level. And we should always remember that. But this is the type of narrative the right wing spent all weekend building. This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way. And let's also not forget, Mike Lee is just an asshole. Okay? You don't need to know about who he is. He's an asshole. And people, and obviously, people have replied and, and are, really happy, some are very agreeing to be kind of like, yeah, they're, violent and sort of thing and whatnot, and kind of going along with this narrative. But the unfortunate reality is, given his, the narrative around him, his political proclivities, the videos that are coming out, all this type of thing, it's quite obvious where his political leanings really lay. It would be unusual for another Democrat to target Democrat legislators. And kind of on top of that end of things, he had a manifesto. He had other people, including abortion providers. Most Democrats are not going to go after abortion providers. Sorry, they're not. It's quite obvious that he had a political grudge and he wanted to take it out. But here's the great thing. He didn't kill himself. There's going to be an investigation and a trial, and we're going to be able to hear from this guy in living technicolor to find out just what was going on in his brain. So, it'll be a quite interesting thing. And so the investigation will be interesting. Obviously, the story is going to continue to develop over time. I kind of had the whole just kind of tweet situation up here because there was just so much stuff that was going on and so many things that had gone back and forth. And Melissa Hortman had been a former Speaker of the Minnesota House. This has now also caused them to have a majority problem because they only had a 1-seat Republican majority in the Minnesota State House. That's gonna be a whole mess. Sort of thing. So, a video from the last poor woman who was shot for serving in government. and her husband, the astronaut. Um, it's, obviously they know more than anything how awful this moment is for the families and whatnot. So, and like I said, letters of support pouring in, and yeah, it's been quite a shit show. Um, and it says, "Oh, Belter's wife was found detained in Onamia, Minnesota this morning. I've been told a large amount of cash and passports were found with her. It's also believed Belter withdrew money from a bank after the shootings as the manhunt continues." So, he was trying to escape, but he did not escape. He was apprehended, and that was a good thing. But remember, this Republican voting, Trump supporting, anti abortion evangelical is a Marxist. Screw you, Mike Lee, and your dumb narrative. Like, if you're going to perform it, at least try to make it right. So, in the midst of a manhunt and murdered state legislators, we had on Saturday the U.S. Army celebration for 250 years of the U.S. Army. They were founded in 1775. We had that. This is a picture by J.D. Vance. The crowd was, well, everyone likes to talk about crowd sizes because Trump likes to talk about crowd sizes. But the crowd was not impressive. People were also horrified at the lack of marching discipline among the troops. I should point out that although this ended up corresponding with President Trump's birthday and he kind of made it all about him, this 250-year anniversary Army parade was actually planned last year. So that was already in place. Trump co-opted it because he never thinks of anything himself. He co-opted it to make it about himself, as he does, as he would. And obviously there's been a lot of back and forth between people on the right saying no one went to the No Kings protest and people on the left saying no one went to Trump's thing. Well, it honestly, the weather wasn't that good this weekend. No one was out. So we see here a rather sparse crowd and J.D. Vance's lovely children, God bless them, here, and some military equipment and some ceremonial stuff happening. Then also for, is this the other? No. And then the No Kings protest, there was pictures from around the country. I've seen reports of anywhere between 8 to 11 million people nationwide. But I saved this particular tweet because this is, I think, really crystallizes the difference between the differences of perspective and narrative around authoritarianism and tyranny and how much the pandemic really broke people in this country. Here we have: no kings but put your mask on. No kings but lock us down. No kings but I'm firing you for not vaccinating. No kings but you can't go outside. No kings but we don't accept your exemption. No kings but you need 12,380 boosters. No kings but we're shutting your business down. No kings but you can't worship the real king. No kings but your family members will die alone. No kings but I'm opening a hotline so you can tell your neighbor. No kings but mandates galore. No kings but you're responsible for my health. No kings but social distance at 6 feet apart. No kings but no family gatherings over 10. The hypocrisy is astounding. Who is actually the tyrant here? Of all of the things in their list, almost all of them, except one, has to do with the pandemic lockdowns. And I think we very much underestimate how much the pandemic lockdowns really backfired politically. I don't think they really worked for the public health crisis we were having at the time. But I've always said one of the phrases that has stood out for me about the pandemic is, for people who couldn't work because certain businesses were shut down, they never said, oh, we got shut down because of the pandemic or because of the virus. The phrase they use is, my job was made illegal. It always comes out in language. Always, always, always. How people phrase things will tell you everything that you want to know about how they think about it. My job was made illegal. Now, if you think about the face of that statement and the emotions behind that, and then you read this, you start to understand where people are coming from to say, from their perspective, they're trying to stop more of the pandemic restrictions from happening. From the left's perspective, this was not a problem, and was essential to preventing the hospital systems from collapsing, and was not authoritarian in the same way they view Trump as being authoritarian for the Doge cuts, for deploying troops in Los Angeles to restore order, all this sort of thing, and kind of militarizing the country. And I have a story from the New Yorker about that. All this sort of thing. It's two very different worlds and two very different perspectives of, people wanted the option to not participate in the pandemic health stuff, and they were called out, criticized, called terrible things online, called un-American, all this type of thing, and they've just said no more. And I said at the time, Americans are not used to government being that involved in their daily lives, unlike the Asians or the Europeans. We really don't deal with government that often. Like, we don't. We do not. We very rarely have interactions with government every day. Most of the rest of the world is not really like that. But we don't really interact with government every day. And so people were really shocked by, what do you mean I can't go to work? What do you mean I can't make money? What do you mean I can't operate my business? What do you mean I'm going to lose everything because of a virus? Like for most people, yeah, the virus is bad and people might get sick, but I need to make a buck. I need to pay my bills. So, and we literally was kind of like, no, you really can't. Like, people will get sick, it'll collapse the hospital system. But nobody, again, when your bills aren't being paid, no one cares about the hospital system. And especially when, you get vaccine requirements, people are forced out of their jobs, forced into early retirement, all this type of thing. It doesn't matter, sort of. The narrative is always going to be, I had to do this to keep my job. I didn't feel like I had a choice or an option, even though I didn't really want to, all this type of thing. And so I wanted to kind of expose this narrative, this view of these things and why these things are the way they are, to kind of make the greater point of one man's oppressor is another man's law and order solution. And also, I think a lot of the violence we're seeing right now, and I said in January, we're going into a time of the lead, and we're seeing sort of just low-level attacks and violence happening. This is very emblematic of, I think, why some people feel like they need to fight back, and how contentious this all can be and will be. And that's where we turn to this lovely column from the New Yorker from Saturday by Robin Wright, and she talks about the kind of the feeling in Washington. And it says here, America today is distinctly ununited. Activists from an array of causes have coalesced behind the No Kings movement, which rejects authoritarianism, billionaire-first politics, and the militarization of our democracy. It is orchestrating almost 2,000 Day of Defiance rallies from coast to coast to coincide with Trump's parade. On Instagram, the group wrote, quote, "The wannabe dictator wants a party? Well, then let's show him some love in every location that Trump is in, because in America we have no kings." The president has since threatened to deploy, quote, "very heavy force," unquote, against demonstrators. They, quote, "hate our country," unquote, he said this week. The organizers are preparing for millions of people to turn out, which may end up dwarfing the spectacle in Washington. Trump's regime has broken so many laws, threatened so many people, and ruined or damaged so many institutions that it's no longer legitimate. David Blight, a historian at Yale and Pulitzer Prize-winning expert on Civil War, told me this week, quote, "As a society, we have to take back our government. Yes, this means mass protest and a challenge to power that we have not seen since the 60s, unquote. He noted that the Declaration of Independence affirms the right, quote, "to alter or to abolish," unquote, government when it has abused its people excessively and forfeited its legitimacy. Quote, "That Declaration of Independence sits there, a living thing, breathing at us, beckoning us to read it, and in the spirit of our founding, act upon it," Blight said. "Last weekend, I drove down the parade route along Constitution Avenue. Long flatbed trucks were offloading pallets of metal plates to help protect the streets from dozens of M1 Abrams battle tanks, which weigh up to 70 tons. They will slowly grind their way from the Lincoln Memorial to the Washington Memorial, alongside missiles, rocket launchers, howitzer cannons, and Bradley and Stryker fighting vehicles. 6,700 troops will also participate. The Pentagon has estimated the cost for the 90-minute procession at somewhere between $25 and $42 million. That's at least $3 million per block. The event will take place against the backdrop of DOJ's firing of hundreds of thousands of federal workers and civil servants, including at the Pentagon, and the slashing of social services from Medicaid to school lunches for low-income children. There's a raw ache and sense of unease in Washington. 18 miles of fencing has been put up on the National Mall and beyond. 175 magnetometers were installed to screen parade attendees. Tickets had to be booked in advance. Passenger flights are due to be suspended for several hours at Washington's Ronald Reagan National Airport to accommodate military flyovers and paratroopers dropping from the skies. Trump's birthday parade might make the city feel more like it is experiencing a coup d'etat than it is honoring soldiers who have well served the nation. All of this feels somewhat hypocritical. In the past, Trump disparaged more than 1,800 military personnel who died in the Battle of Belleau Wood, which stopped the German advance in France during the First World War, as, quote, suckers. He balked at visiting the nearby cemetery where they were buried, reportedly because the rain would mess up his hair. John Kelly, Trump's chief of staff during his first term, said the president did not want to be pictured with amputees because it didn't, quote, look good, unquote. In 2023, Kelly told CNN that Trump, quote, has no idea what America stands for and has no idea what America's all about, unquote. Even Republicans seemed dubious at the parade. In a survey by Politico, only 7 of the 50 GOP lawmakers who responded said they would attend. Among those skipping it, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Majority Whip John Barrasso, and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, told Politico that he, quote, would have recommended against the parade, unquote, after he heard the cost. In a televised address on Tuesday, Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor of California, warned that Trump's decision to circumvent state authorities to deploy the military to LA was a brazen use of power that had inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk. California, quote, may be first, he went on, but it clearly will not end here. Democracy, he added, is next. Washington certainly felt that way this week. I mean, at some point, what do you do with all of this? You know, I mean, it's certainly, things have certainly taken a turn. And I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get any better. And I think it's a quite frightening time that we're entering into. Narratively, it reminds me of the last season of House of Cards. It feels a lot like that. If you didn't go watch the last season of House of Cards, go watch a couple episodes, really. It will be surprisingly familiar to what's happening now. And it was filmed several years ago. It's so dry today. I'm just having all kinds of issues. It's very telling, very, very interesting. I think we're going to have more. I mean, obviously, we've got troops on the ground in LA. We've got parades in Washington. We've got state reps being shot in Minnesota. It's chaos. That's the political moment we're in. We're in chaos right now. I don't know how this is going to play out. But it's going to be, as my aunt would say, it sure will be interesting, though. But I think it's also going to be very dangerous. So, stay safe, everyone. Let's turn to the next bit of story. Kind of getting out of all of that for a moment. Actually, I'm not going to do that right now. Let's talk about FEMA. Because if I don't mention this now, we're not going to get to it. But it's very important. So, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is going to be wound down after hurricane season. Disaster funds will be distributed directly from the White House. Trump says states will get less federal aid for disasters. Homeland Security Secretary Homan supports FEMA downsizing. And FEMA has an annual budget of $30 billion. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday last week he planned to start phasing out the Federal Emergency Management Agency after the hurricane season and that states would receive less federal aid to respond to natural disasters. Trump also said he planned to distribute disaster relief funds directly from the president's office. We're going to do it much differently, Trump said in a briefing at the White House in response to a question about when he planned to eliminate FEMA and what his message was to governors regarding states here bearing more disaster relief costs. We're going to give out less money, he said. We're going to give it out directly. It'll be from the president's office. We'll have somebody here, could be Homeland Security. In an apparent reference to his plans to wind down the disaster relief agency, Trump added, "I'd say after the hurricane season, we'll start phasing it out." The U.S. hurricane season officially began on June 1st and lasts through November. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration forecast last month that this year's season would be above normal with as many as 10 hurricanes. Trump's comments were among the most direct to date, indicating his intention to significantly downsize, if not outright eliminate, FEMA, which has an annual budget of around $30 billion and employed more than 20,000 people, including reservists, prior to layoffs earlier this year. Distributing funds directly from the White House would also mark a departure from current protocols under which FEMA oversees the dissemination of financial aid to the states following the president's declaration of a disaster. Also at the briefing, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said that FEMA, quote, fundamentally needs to go away as it exists, unquote, and that governors were being encouraged to work together to respond to disasters. Quote, we're building communication and mutual aid agreements among states so they can stand on their own 2 feet, with the federal government coming in catastrophic circumstances with funding, Noem said. FEMA is part of the Department of Homeland Security. Fun. Yeah, that's, also will allow Trump to use federal funds basically as a bargaining chip with governors and states. Which that's one thing. I think the other kind of sad reality is, people are gonna suffer a lot. Like, don't move to Florida. I mean, it's, who's gonna be distributing FEMA trailers? There will be no more trailers. Who's gonna give money out to people who, need money in a pinch to get through? There will be none. Like, it's if you're gonna leave it to the states entirely, that's gonna leave a lot of gaps. That's gonna create a lot of problems, huge funding gaps that states cannot begin to always afford to do. Yeah, it's gonna be honestly, this is all gonna be all fun and games until you have the first hurricane without FEMA to come in and help clean up and manage and all this type of thing, and people are going to find out. And unfortunately, this is such a small story, no one will really care until the first hurricane comes through, and then the thing is, and here's the clever thing about it, is we're talking about this now. The wind down isn't going to happen until next winter, which means people won't really notice FEMA's gone till next summer, when the first hurricane hits, and that trailer ain't showing up. Yeah, then it will be interesting to see what the outcry is and all this sort of thing. And then Trump gets to be the big man to be like, hey, you need $5 billion for disaster relief? Well, if you're my friend, maybe I'll let you have some money. But it's not automatic anymore. You basically have to curry favor with the president in order to get access to emergency management money. Which, I mean, at this point, if you're a blue state governor, you're screwed, in simple terms. Like, I mean, Florida will be fine because Ron DeSantis. I mean, but Trump's not a huge fan of DeSantis either, so maybe Florida's screwed. This is the problem when you entrust the funding in the hands of one person. You can't rely on it. How much of a friend are you to Trump? Maybe you'll get some money, maybe you won't. Maybe he wants your support on something, but you need that money, sort of thing. And so it creates the swirl all around him. And here's the funny part. No one will care about this story, which is why I'm talking about it. If a Democrat had done this, can you imagine what red states would be saying? I'll tell you what the narrative would be. Joe Biden wants you to die. I mean, even just with what happened with the hurricane in Western North Carolina, last fall. Biden's abandoning. Kamala Harris isn't here. They've given up. They're not helping you because you live in a red state. That's already the narrative. If Joe Biden said, "Oh yeah, we're getting rid of FEMA, and now you can just call the White House switchboard, and maybe we'll hand out a check or anything," I guarantee you the narrative would be Joe Biden's Democrats are telling you to go die. The next time a hurricane comes, the next time a disaster comes, Democrats are telling you to go die. That's what the narrative would be. It would be straight to go die. Sort of thing. So it's it's not a good thing. it's a quite unfortunate situation, and the reality is there's just going to be fewer resources available, especially given, a lot of these people are very specialized. There's big agencies, facilities, there's, command and control centers, equipment, all this type of thing, and all that is going to be gone. Who knows where all that will go, how it will be deployed, who will be in charge of that. It's almost like we should have an agency for it. Maybe we'll call it the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Moving right along, this is interesting. So, Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA plans to discredit Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Act. I had forgotten that this was in my bookmarks. And this is from a long time ago. And it was a story from Wired that I found today, and I realized I hadn't really ever talked about it. But it was an interesting okay, it's paywalled. It's an interesting thing because to some degree we've kind of started seeing the manifestation of this, particularly in some certain online spaces, about people really wanting to repeal the Civil Rights Act, disenfranchise black people. You might have heard the term black fatigue going around, or its evil cousin, Democrat fatigue. And it kind of comes out of all of this idea that what's really gone wrong with the country is the Negroes got too uppity. And he says, Kirk argues that the Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination on the basis of race, ushered in a permanent DEI-type bureaucracy. Kirk's comments at America Fest were merely a preview of his attacks on King. He recently said that he plans to release content to discredit MLK on January 15th, King's birthday, which is a U.S. federal holiday honoring King. We're going to be hitting him next week, Kirk said on his podcast this week. Yeah, on the day of the Iowa caucus, it's MLK Day, we're going to do the thing you're not supposed to do. We're going to tell the truth about MLK Jr. You better tune in next week. Blake's already been preparing. It's going to be great. And it's kind of funny because I remember, now that I'm sitting here talking about it, I remember at the time when all of that come out, people were making a big deal about the fact that MLK basically was a pimp, which is true. And that he had, different sort of biographical issues, and why was he picked as this, great leader? Why was he so venerated? Some people have called him, a second founder of the Republic. And the only reason I bring this up is that this was from a year ago, and it's kind of funny how sometimes we don't always look back, and then sometimes, by the accident of me not cleaning out my Twitter bookmarks, we end up with a quick lens to the past, and we can now see, with clarity, a lot of the discussions that have manifested themselves in the intervening year and a half since this happened. The anti-woke, anti-DEI, black fatigue, repeal the sort of loud voices of people complaining about race relations in this country and how fractious things got and how sort of diversity and DEI and everything has kind of just sort of fallen apart. I won't say this was the start of it because all that predates it, but this certainly has had an effect, I think, in one way in particular, giving people permission to be openly hateful and bigoted. And that's a very powerful thing. There's a lot of people that will get shut up through social pressure. They still believe the same old stuff, but it's now not polite to say so in polite company. One of the things Trump did with racism is he made it acceptable to be racist again. Charlie Kirk is now taking that one step further, and he's also going after, sort of the sacred icons, the people, the gods in the temple, if you will, against that as well. And when you consider that this is where we were going into the 2024 cycle, it's no surprise how it ended. Or how absolutely out of control the narrative got in the course of the year. And it's only gone on since there. This whole idea that there is, the civil rights movement and everything about that is this sort of, sacred thing that has you respect for how amazing it was and how wonderful it was and how much it changed the society. There's a lot of people on the right who are really questioning that, that are really, being like, well, maybe segregation wasn't so bad, maybe we could solve half of society's problems if we just, get rid of the black people, sort of thing. And get back to, a high trust, undiverse society that, makes it better if you're white, sort of thing. And I think it's interesting how in a very short period of time, we've literally gone from, okay, let's elect Barack Obama, to, well, we just need to go back to 1865. Like, I mean, somehow it just didn't take us that long to get there, amazingly enough. And the more people that come out and talk like this, not that they shouldn't, they have free speech, but the more the narrative is out there, I'm amazed by the number of people who are sort of quietly, reservedly, without drawing attention to themselves, are coming along and being like, yeah, man, I agree with you too. I think that's interesting. I think that's telling about where we are as a people. I think it's quite sad too. But speaking of this very problem, I put these two stories together for a reason. Speaking of where we are on this, this little graphic has been floating around Twitter. And it comes from a study in do we know where it's from? Oh, Horizon Europe. Oh, it's funded by Horizon Europe. I guess we don't know where it's from. But this graphic has been floating around from these three people who said attitude networks as intergroup realities, using network modeling to research attitude identity relationships in polarized political contexts. And the abstract is they were basically studying what kind of binds people together and how closer their beliefs versus how far apart they are. And so what they did is they took in an absurd amount of data, and they find that, according to the present findings, Democrats more than Republicans tightly center their belief system around a set of positions at the extremes of these particular items, implying that people who deviate from these positions are likely to be considered as outgroup members. Extremity should thereby be understood as a function of both the formulation of the item and the response. It is possible that holding extreme and thus unnegotiable attitudes on important social political issues has become increasingly identity-defining for Democrats, not the least in response to Donald Trump's controversial presidency. And basically what the graphic shows is that on the left, there is a very tight ideological core of everyone together, believing many similar things, and if you don't sort of believe all of these things, you are put farther and farther out. Whereas on the right, you have a little bit of a tight core in this area, but the numbers of things that still coalesce around that tight core is much wider than that coalesces around around the left-wing core. Which, basically, the thing I love about this is it kind of proves my point that I've had for many, many years, and one of the reasons why Donald Trump Make America Great Again works so well. Make America Great Again can be anything anyone wants it to be. It's one of those phrases that you can take it in on yourself, and it is whatever you want it to be. It can mean to you whatever you want it to mean. And we see here that, this diversity of opinions and attitudes and thoughts and all this type of thing, really, it's this very broad, big tent sort of thing. Whereas, on the left, we would never probably come up with a phrase like that, because there are certain core things you have to sign on to if you're going to be a Democrat and last in the party any length of time. You've got to support LGBTQ people. You have to be into, diversity, not be a racist, all this sort of, there's kind of these fundamental things that really define the Democrats and Democratic Party over the right, which is a lot more open to different people who might, be a little bit more liberal out here, be very conservative over here, might have a Democratic opinion or two up here. There's a lot more openness. And let's face it, the reality is if you're trying to argue to a diverse electorate who probably lives somewhere in the middle, like this is where most of the country's at, is like in this area. They're not these are diehards, these are diehards. Most of the countries living in this area. I mean, just by size of the image, if most of the country lives in this space, the number of ways you can align with the Republican agenda over the Democrat agenda is just huge. And unfortunately, I think if the Democrats want to really widen and broaden their base and appeal, they're going to have to get farther away from this core. But I don't think they're going to do that. There's just too many base assumptions of the political left in this country that you kind of have to sign on to. The other thing the Republicans have the advantage of is there's very little required to be over here. There's a lot required to be over on the left. Like, on the right, you can just be a guy who doesn't really pay attention to politics or the news. Maybe you watch my show. Maybe you listen to a couple podcasts, or you listen to a non-political podcast that mentions politics every 4 years around a presidential election. And there's plenty of opportunity for you to glom on to some beliefs on this side. Not over here. Look at how little there is. You're all in. You're all in or you're out. Whereas here, you can be a casual. You can live in this space. It's a completely different political economy. And so, obviously, we're not getting into all the things people have said about this graphic as it's popped around, but it's a very interesting thing to look at and to kind of have America's political ideology mapped physically. This is a great, huge advantage for Republicans moving forward. I mean, to some degree, the disadvantage of the way Democrats are is this is a known quantity. People have a list of things that they think Democrats believe in or whatever have you. And they're, they're either in or they're out with it kind of already. Whereas over here, it's dynamic. There's movement. There's room to grow. There's room to have a different opinion on some certain issues or not, or all this type of thing. You don't have to be a diehard to find a spot in this much greater ecosystem. And I think that that's a big problem for Democrats moving forward. It just is. Like, you can't win a majority election in a country as big and diverse as ours by solely catering to this group here. And not even have that much around it. Like, it's very narrow. It's a narrow set of beliefs. And this is election losing. It just is. This has got to get opened up. And I will say, as someone who's a triple minority, I realize I'm the person getting thrown overboard when I say open this up. But I also want to see people that I at least somewhat agree with in power in this country. And I think a lot of, these people living in the middle could be brought back over if things are a little bit more open. And if you allowed, the phenomena of conservative Democrats again, which all have been driven out of the party. So on a domestic policy side, it's a very kind of interesting sort of thing. Last couple stories. This Will Stansel thread about our whole society going Nazi, we're just not going to read. This one was interesting. It's funny. American attitudes towards free trade have rapidly polarized. No, they haven't. And I'll tell you why. Every major free trade deal in this country has been signed by a Democrat. Democrats have always been for free trade. It was Republicans who got on the free trade train because their corporate donors wanted free trade. There's no political realignment or anything like that. Democrats have always been in favor of free trade. Now, when it comes to free speech, there's a bit of a different divide in terms of Democrats are much more likely to be open to internet censorship than Republicans are on a lot of different issues, according to this YouGov to this YouGov poll. Like, the internet promotes people finding common ground. The internet makes it easier for people to share their views without consequences. All this type of thing. The internet makes it easier for people to share their views with a large number of people. And then this one's kind of the big telling one. The internet should be a free speech zone where speech should be uncensored. Republicans, 72%. Democrats, 34%. The free speech thing is a bit of a realignment, but the free trade thing definitely isn't. And I, again, found in my bookmarks that I thought it was worth mentioning. And I only saved this to say, no, Democrats have always been the party of free trade. Always. Bill Clinton signed 3 major pieces of free trade deals during his presidency. No, Obama was going to sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and people in the party activated, lobbied, and got him to pull out of it. But he was fully on board. Absolutely fully on board. One of the mistakes the Democrat Party has made is not acknowledging the failures of free trade. And they have ceded that issue to the Republican Party and to Trump, and that's the reason why we're having a trade war right now. When it comes to the free speech end of things, I'm a radical free speech person, but I'm in the minority. Most people are not that way. Most people, want some, a lot of people want some sort of censorship. I always say, bring it on. My comment section is open. People spend a lot of time calling me fat and ugly and all this type of thing. Some people leave actual good comments, and I reply to those. Most of the time, it's just telling me to find a doctor and lose weight. That's what my comment section is. But I never restrict the comments. I don't delete comments either. I leave them there because I appreciate the engagement score for the algorithm. And then finally, the video from Peter Thiel. Okay. So, I wanted to watch this video because, as we know, Peter Thiel got J.D. Vance into power. He's been a big part of the sort of shadowy figures in the Republican Party. And there's now this sort of anti-science thing. And this is a great way to finish because it kind of tells us where we're going. So, let's watch.
The late 19th, early 20th century, there was a movement called Cosmism in the sort of around the time of the Soviet Revolution, 1920s Soviet Union, and it claimed that for the revolution to succeed, you had to physically resurrect all the dead people using science. And it was workers of the world unite, and to sort of get with the times, their slogan was "Dead of the world unite." And then, of course, they didn't make much progress on this. And then at some point, by the time you get to Stalin and the show trials, and the deaths seem to be going up, not down. But yeah,
there was a moment when they thought it might even be possible.
There was an incredible ambition and incredible energy to modern science. It was perhaps downstream from Christianity. If the promise of Christianity is a physical resurrection, then science could offer that too. Or it was a possibility. Maybe it was a rival to Christianity. You don't need Christianity if we can do it through science. And then there is a strange way that the project, in many dimensions, feels very exhausted, even though, of course, people still genuflect to science. They believe in science with a capital S, but the ambition has been really beaten out. If you look at the individual scientists, it's much less of this sort of heroic, bold figure who breaks with dogmas and thinks for him or herself, and it's much more, in late modernity,
And I mean, it's an interesting, idea that somehow science is exhausted or broken, and that we need to move on to move on to something else. But this is interesting. I kind of emphasize enough that the reason Trump has gone balls out to destroy science and the medicine is the living Antichrist Peter Thiel, seen here in his regulation Himmler haircut. He says science is exhausted and proposes something more Christian, like Russian cosmism. And someone down here says, he's an atheist who's constructed a way to be pro-theocracy. He was recruited by Opus Dei at Stanford. There's a reason he got where he is. But his belief system is far darker. He literally sees himself as the techno-antichrist with a big splash of esoteric Nazism. I have not really dug into him. The person I would like to see talk about is Kara Swisher. I need to go watch some videos about that, but I thought this whole idea of the sort of Russian cosmism, the sort of, science replacing Christianity in the sort of pseudo-scientific religious sort of thing is very interesting. And I think it's something, and the title is interesting. Um, you know, I think it's interesting to something to look at and keep an eye on, because given, I mean, although we've kind of moved on from uh the pulling of science funding and going after institutions, those stories have kind of de-emphasized themselves. If this is the philosophy that we're going towards and the philosophy that we're working with, we should be very, very worried, because anybody that gets in the way of his plans, if you get in the way, if you don't conform or fit in, it's not going to end well for you. Sort of thing. People like to throw around eugenics a lot. I think it's maybe a bit premature for that, but this whole, this whole idea that we need to move past science and medicine and into a sort of different belief system, that's sort of theocratic. It also gets into the rise of Christian nationalism in the Republican Party. There are multiple podcast episodes on that, so please go watch them. This is where we're headed. I'll say it. This is where we're headed, and we need to be very concerned. Why am I not following this person? We need to be very concerned about this. So that's a frightening way to end the evening. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we always like to end on a little bit of a fright. We'll keep an eye on Mr. Theil and this whole Russian cosmism story thing. I will probably end up digging further into that as time goes on, but we have fun here. So, my name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal News Hour. Make sure to follow me on social media at CameronJournal.com. Go sign up for Cameron Journal Plus. It's a lot of fun. Also, we're building up the Discord, building community. I talked a lot about community in Saturday's newsletter, which is right on CameronJournal.com. You can go read it. Try before you buy, if you will. Thinking a lot about community. We're trying to build a really great community here. So, I will see you next Monday. Thank you so much for watching. Today's interview is very fiction focused, but if you love fantasy, go listen to J.V. Hilliard talk about his best-selling fantasy series. He's the Warminster Saga. J.V. Hilliard's a great fantasy author. He's really great. He's been building his own community of fantasy authors. He's actually helping us promote our next fantasy anthology from Soup called Fantastic Worlds, which is going into production right now, which is really great. That's the interview this week. Otherwise, I will see you next Monday right here at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Cameron Journal News Hour. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.